Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm back with Peter Scalzo, and we've been journeying through the wall with him for a few weeks now, and it's really been utilizing his journal to do a description of the journey and just exploring that together. And so, Peter, it's good that we're back at this again today, and I think I wanted to kick off today just a little bit with how you were feeling about this journey of exploration of your journal and just some reflections about what you've been seeing, feeling, and sensing as you've re-explored this, I guess, together with somebody else and even maybe in a public way.
Yeah, I think it's been helpful for me, almost like therapy, to revisit this. One thing is that I'm still on this journey medically. Like I still don't feel well. This represents a surgery that was done in 2015, but here I sit in 2024 still dealing with surgeries. I have one in a couple weeks with cancer tests and treatments and procedure scans, all that. So I'm sort of reflecting back on this journal with the sense of, well, I really am still on this journey, even though this event in 2015 was a sea change event, because it really marked the point at which the cancer became metastatic and the outlook became bleak. And so it's what does it look like for me to have been in that pit and not to have prepared myself, had no tools for being in that pit. And so I reflect back. You pointed out to me how I was not alone, and I think that was critical, that I had children and friends. I even noticed one of my good buddies who's a priest stopped by at 5:45 in the morning to anoint me in my room. So I had that reassurance, that support. And then I think reliving the raw emotions is hard, because I remember feeling that bleakness and desperation. I think it's why we struggle so much. I'm just saying to relive traumatic events in our lives. For instance, a PTSD person, a soldier who doesn't want to relive what happened, what they saw and experienced.
But you've experienced that as we've gone through, reliving the actual feelings that you've had to re-feel some of these feelings.
And I think you asked me to think about the smells and the sounds. And I was kind of put on the spot there, which is good for me, but I had a chance to sort of think further about it. And I think the more I think further about it, some more things come into clarity. But it's interesting because it's not a place that I want to go to. It's a place I'm choosing to go to in hopes that people can relate to my journey, facing the wall and then going through the wall. But I think that I'm going to be the beneficiary of having had this discussion, of re-looking at my journal and having you analyze it with me and go through this wall.
Yeah, I want to talk on something. I told you I would hit on this a little bit, and I was thinking about something we talked about last time, was the fact that you had wrote down fears and you put the word truths around them, and there was truth in those fears, but there were as much writing down your fears. And I think that's a healthy exercise. And the reason why I wanted to highlight it wasn't to pick on you saying, hey, you wrote something that's a truth, that's a fear, is trying to knock you down. It was more to think about. I think the journey through the wall for you and for all of us is facing our fears. And you had talked about, one of your biggest fears was, having a terminal illness or something like that would have been, was a devastating thing. And so the journey through the wall is facing your biggest fear. And you took time to write them down. You put different words around it. One of the things I wanted to just see as you sit here today, and this was a 2015 exercise, and so we're 2024 as we're recording
Yeah.
this. So somewhere in the 9 years, give or take, some months either way, we are talking about this, and you just described that you really haven't been able to overcome the fact that you have a terminal diagnosis over your head and that your
Hmm.
body is still failing
Yeah.
in a big way.
And I sandwiched in there, I did have another recurrence. I had a treatment change. In other words, in 2018, I had another recurrence. I've had six, probably seven recurrences, but I
Yeah.
had one then.
There's so much uncertainty. How would you describe the fear today?
Oh, and 2017 was a big event where I was in the hospital and they said, go on disability, quit work, and go home and call hospice.
Yeah.
So after this event, I still had other,
You have more wall to go through.
yeah, more to go through. Yeah.
I'm interested though because of the fact that we've
Hmm.
explored your 2015 journal and you wrote
Hmm.
in that period of the early wall, like that initial hitting the wall and your first steps in, you wrote, you know, some of the hardest,
Hmm.
darkest, and it was dark and getting darker is what you had
Hmm.
described, but then you wrote those fears. And the fact that you really haven't stopped facing that
Hmm.
even to today,
Hmm.
where's the fear meter at? Like what has happened in that space? If you were to write a journal right now, would it have the same language that you wrote then?
Yeah, great question. I don't think it would have the same intensity. I think I would the same feelings would pop up, but they wouldn't be have as much volume. They wouldn't be as charged.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, if they said to me, "Okay, we're going to stop treatment and we're going to send you home," um, I'm in a much better place today dealing with the fear and the sadness with
Yeah.
that than I was back here. I've had really 9 years of ongoing cancer issues to
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that's interesting to me about as when we looked at those journal entries on your fears, the thing that stuck out to me was it sounded more absolute.
Mm-hmm.
My body is done.
Yeah.
I'm financially ruined.
Yeah.
There's no options. There's really no hope here. It was kind of the big things that were put on the table,
Yeah.
and they were expressions of real what it felt like in that moment.
Yeah.
They weren't completely true. They were
Right.
partial truths, and I
Right.
think that's something to really be thinking about as you're
Mm-hmm.
going on. Because what I would say today is that what I've seen in you isn't that you don't feel those same pains and you don't have the same things hanging over your head. It's that it's sitting somewhere in the right place of balance.
Mm-hmm.
There is hope for tomorrow. You just
Mm-hmm.
don't know what tomorrow looks like. You're not financially ruined, but there are financial pressures and
Mm-hmm.
stresses,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a sense of you don't know what it's going to look like, but you have the ability to take the next step.
Yeah.
When you wrote those, it was almost as if from a where you're, and you could describe this or say, yes, this relates, but as if you were saying, I am done.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't hope of a next step
Right.
when you wrote those
Right.
originally.
And I think this is the important thing for me is I think this is why what my son did was so critical. He didn't try to correct me or give me a bandage. He just said, okay. In other words, he gave me permission to vent. And, I was reacting in fear, which was, okay, this is all done. That's it. I'm going to pass all that. And you're right. I mean, in reality, here I am. That didn't happen. I'm not financially ruined.
Well, in your story though, like as we start thinking about story work and you're sharing a bit of your story in your
Yeah.
journal, it's all great stories have a dramatic problem, an event, something that's bigger than what you can solve inside of yourself. And so I'm going to make an argument that the reason why the wall is so important for our development is that God's doing his biggest work in you in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I thought it would be just interesting for a second to start out with this is that we are 9 years later. And
Mm-hmm.
I loved this concept that the guys on the Wild at Heart podcast had shared was when you look back 1 year, it just doesn't feel like you've grown that much most of the time. You just look
Mm-hmm.
back and you're just like, I feel like, maybe I even failed this last year. I didn't grow at all, or I went backwards. But if you look back 10 years and you actually have been trying to engage your story, your journey, your faith journey and grow, I look at the last 9 years or 10 years of my life, and then I look at what you're sharing now, 10 years back,
Mm-hmm.
you're not controlled by fear.
Mm-hmm.
And yet in many ways, nothing's changed
Mm-hmm.
in the things that you talked about.
Right.
The level of financial understanding or, ruin hasn't changed. The needle hasn't moved much from where you were at.
Right.
And your prognosis in your cancer and health journey, it hasn't really improved in one sense. In another sense, it has. I mean, the tumors went away, but you're today, you're past anything that the medical doctors know
Mm-hmm.
what to do with related to immunotherapy.
Right.
And the therapy itself seems to be shutting down your kidneys, which is
Mm-hmm.
life-threatening. And so it's almost as if you're caught in a catch-22 with your
Mm-hmm.
medical journey. And so I don't say that to be a downer. It's just there isn't some certainty about, oh, hey,
Right.
I've been healed and everything's just, you have so much uncertainty in front of you, but you're not dominated by fear.
Right.
And so I would say the wall in these 10 years has
Mm-hmm.
done something big to you, and
Yeah.
that you are one of the most joyful, engaging people that I know. And I have a sense that some of that has come from going through this wall experience. And so I wanted to just
Yeah.
highlight that because it's not the
Yeah.
fear, expressing the fear up front that's a problem.
All right.
In fact, that's probably the first steps of the solution is expressing the real, getting it on the table. And you talked about that you'd finally got honest with God
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
about what you felt,
Yes.
and that there was a weight that was let off by doing that.
Yeah.
And letting that weight off so much of the time doesn't feel like growth, but I think it's one of the very first important steps towards real growth in our inner person.
Mm-hmm.
Getting
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
Getting honest about what we feel,
Yeah.
even if it's not true
Right.
completely.
Yeah. I think between my recovery journey, which I got into 1 year before this, and the divorce that was the marital issues that were brewing, and then this wall, God brought me into a place which I believe, in fact, I'm convinced, is the birthplace of authentic spirituality or authentic kingdom living. And it's, we've talked about it a lot, but it's Matthew 5:3, blessed are the poor in spirit. And so I was brought into a poverty of spirit place. What does that look like for me? It looked like, for the first time, looking at my own brokenness, looking at the way I process things, looking at the fear level in my life. Yeah, for the first time, being honest with God, myself, and others. And recognizing that I am broken. And I love the powerlessness aspect of the recovery journey, is to recognize that I truly am powerless over the cancer struggle, but I make decisions as guided by the Holy Spirit along the way. And turning my life and will over to my higher power, Jesus Christ, has been the most freeing. And when I say life, I'm talking about my physical body too, my physical life.
Yeah.
Because I never know what's going to happen. So turning my life and will over, like I was thinking this morning, moving into that 800 square foot apartment, you know my story, with 7 banker boxes labeled cancer and divorce and taxes, all that stuff, and living there for 4.5 years. Really, I had a couch and a chair and a bed.
Yeah.
And really had no interest in the accumulation of anything,
Mm-hmm.
money or anything. I had no interest in that. It was God brought me into a place, and I don't want to paint myself off as this highly righteous guy. He just brought me into a place where I saw the emptiness of seeking, possessing stuff, possessing things. Yeah, it's fine to own stuff and be a steward over them. God gives us stuff. But I didn't find my value in that stuff anymore, and including my new truck.
That was one of my favorite stories that you talk about is like you, and is your Subaru,
my car.
your car being wrecked.
Yeah.
Just share that for real quick. That's just such a good.
I'm recuperating from a huge surgery in my house, and I had a fairly new Subaru, and I really didn't have new cars. I mean, 6 kids, and there were 7 cars that looked like a used car lot, but they were all beater kind of cars. But anyway, I thought, well, I've got a fairly new Subaru, and I was sitting in bed and I was thinking, I was feeling a little sorry for myself, and I'm like, yeah, but I have a new car. And so I had turned everything over to Jesus, at least I thought. And I mustered myself up together, all my tubes and bags and bathrobe. And I mean, it took a lot to, I had my Foley. I had to venture, and this was a big house, so I had to venture downstairs. I remember Leslie was doing something in the kitchen. She didn't say anything. I just walked by her, and I opened up the car to the garage. I couldn't drive yet. I couldn't drive for another, whatever it was, weeks. And the front was all smashed. My daughter had smashed, and nobody wanted to say anything to me. When I closed the door, I remember, okay, this is your car, Jesus. So if you want to smash your car, go ahead and smash it. Just went back up to bed. It's like, okay.
I'm sorry. It's like we're laughing. Isn't it funny how you can laugh at things and like in the moment it would be harsh to laugh at, but when you think about, how easily, we're attached to things. And I'm just going to crush that also.
I mean, I just think lots of times I consider myself to be a strong-willed, kind of a stubborn guy, and God hits me over the head with 2x4s. And, another example was in the hospital learning how to urinate again. Yeah. I've told the story, but having the suprapubic tube taken out with 2 nurses and my female surgeon watching me, and standing there, my gown falls off, so I'm naked, and I'm able to dribble a tiny bit into this little plastic urinal that I'm holding, and I'm bearing down. I mean, I'm putting everything into it. And they clapped, and they go, yay, yippee. And it was in that moment that I heard, really, not an audible voice, but felt in my heart and spirit, you are a 2-year-old child again. And that's how I want you to be with me. I mean, these are lessons I could have intellectually thought about, but these were lessons for me.
Well, the question isn't whether we can intellectualize this, like, can we submit our wills to him?
Yeah.
Because that's when you say, I submit my life and will to Christ's care and control, the wall is what takes you to,
yes.
But is that true? Will I submit my will? Because I can intellectualize almost anything, but submitting my will, I don't know about that. And you find out real soon where your heart and will really are as you go through these walls. I think that's such a fascinating thing. And you kind of just showed how this journey in the wall is such an important part. Because to me, I'm going to bet you'll agree with this, like the last 10 years of growth in your journey have been the greatest, the most significant amount of growth in your inner man.
Oh, yeah. By far.
That couldn't have been accomplished any other way.
No, by far.
And so that's why we're spending so much time on the wall, is to really to highlight that. And so let's go a little further today. And I know we have a few minutes, but I'd like to hear, because we come off of the backside there, you had put words of, it looked like praise of there was some hope that you expressed, and let's read those and then read on a little bit.
Okay, so I'm not sure why I wrote some of this at this point, but I did.
Okay.
And I was quoting in Job and the fifth. And remember how I said fact 5,
Yeah,
but
fact.
really truth. Truth 5. Though he slay me, I will still praise him. God will sustain me. He is in charge.
So you're quoting something that's out of the book of Job,
Yeah.
and it's almost maybe like you're taunting God to, let's do this, God.
I think it's this getting into a position of a surrender and just saying, okay,
Yeah,
you're in charge.
yeah. You weren't trying to taunt God at this point.
No.
You had no heart for doing that.
I mean, I was like,
been through enough.
yeah, and I was in the point of hiding under the shelter of his wings and enjoying a deep serenity in him. I was starting to enter into that place. It was still wasn't there yet, but I was starting to, because this journal covers a 2-month process. But
yeah, this is really fascinating. So you went from this change of, you went from expressing deepest fears to expressing at least where your heart was now pointing towards the one place of hope.
Yeah. And I like you pointed out at the last episode how we want to go right from devastation to putting a bow on it. And I love how you pointed out that there's the in-between, the confusing in-between even. And it's important to just sit in the dirt and feel those emotions and be honest with God.
And the sit in the dirt concept is something that it's just been resonating with me for quite a while now. And because we're still doing it, like there's not a point where it's not as if you still don't have a dirt floor. You do.
Right.
There's all the dirt that we're sitting in. There's areas that aren't fixed, won't be fixed, and are unhealed. But can we sit in that? I think that's the question.
Yeah. And, I'm not critical of people that can't. Because
I am
meaning with me. It's
yeah.
I am faced with a terminal diagnosis, really, because that's medically that's what they say. And I have medical stuff that happens all the time. I had to turn in a disability. I have to keep every records of all the doctor's appointments and stuff I have, and it was 3 full pages, single spaced, in a 1-year time period. So each week it seemed like I was doing something. Mm-hmm. And there were like treatments in there, surgeries, office visits, everything. And I get that my life can feel like it's consumed by that. And some people will sit in the dirt with me. Some people won't, and that's okay.
Yeah. So we're on this part of the journey where you've sat in the dirt yourself. There have been people who were there who weren't trying to fix you, who could just hear you're putting the dirt onto paper.
Yep.
And then you had these expressions of hope that are in the midst of that.
Yeah.
Where are we at now, time-wise, approximately?
This is 1 month after, a month and a week after this surgery.
Okay, so the next journal entry is 1 month and a week into after.
Yep.
At this point, your biggest wall in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear it.
How can I serve him now? Because I was in a reclining position. Take me 6 weeks to even get back on my feet. And I put simply by showing God's peace to a world in turmoil. My life is a storm, yet God provides peace and calm.
That's your next entry, and you're a month after the surgery.
Yeah.
Where are you at when you write that?
Home.
You're at home. So you make it home. So there were no other journal entries in the hospital from...
Well, it's kind of weird. Let me see if I've got any more. I do have... They're just out of order, but I do have some more journal entries.
Okay, so there are some in between, because I was going to say that seemed like a big blank had happened there. And so I do find, this is an interesting point that you have this I guess the order might be important here, but I do like the fact that you now start to see what I think the genesis of this podcast comes from is that the fact that you said peace. How can I have peace in the middle of the storm? And then you express it. So this has been a month of journeying towards the source of true peace, which is when I think about calling, and you have a calling now on your life and it's changed from where you were at before, you're now starting to express your calling.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
I think it might be good for us just to see if there's any steps in between, but I think that can be in this next one. We're almost at the end of today's podcast and we've been just recapping a bit of your journey. And I think that's a really good, someplace to really land on there is that you went from fear and then you went into expressing some level of where your hope comes from to a month later, you're able to kind of firmly plant your flag on this is where my heart's at. And I like the fact that you described a bit today of all the things that have been stripped from you as you're on this journey. And it's stripping away of false peace, false hope, false joy, because it's not coming from possessions. It's not coming from health. It's not coming from anything but the creator of your very soul.
Right.
And so you're really highlighting into something that I think is such an important part. Yeah, because at some point here, 8 years later, you said, hey, I want to start sharing this in Cancer and Peace as a podcast and just sharing my journey and having other people come along, not for the purpose of giving medical advice, but for sharing a journey towards real peace in the middle of a storm. And so that's been a big part of what we've been trying to explore here is why that looks, what it looks like, what it feels like, and some of the tools and resources that have come across to you on the way. And I love the fact that you've been sharing a journal because it's been one of your bigger resources to share that. Anything else you want to put a note on this before we close out of this podcast today?
I hope that people see that it's not about me, like me receiving any kind of praise, but it's about God in me. I am the first one to say that this journey has been beyond me, not something that I could do. So that's all. Just want to make that point.
Yeah, I'll let you make that point. I think that's a good something that's hard to balance sometimes when you share yourself. I think about this a lot as like, a narcissist is looking for praise, and the whole reason for doing this is so that you could be viral or popular. And so that's why I think it's good to really understand calling versus striving.
Yeah, I think it's, there's a line there. And the interesting thing is, like, they asked me to preach at my church, Walnut Hill, which is a big church, over 2,000 people listen to those sermons. And so I did, not this August, but last August, a year ago, and it was about my journey. The interesting thing is, happily, I had no sense that I was doing this to be noticed or personal gain. In fact, it didn't matter to me whether I spoke or not. It didn't matter. They asked me to, so I said yes. Because I have a policy when it falls within that little sweet spot that God wants me to do something, I will say yes. So I did it. But even afterwards, I'm like, okay. There was nothing like, oh, look at me doing this, or I wanted to convey a message to that audience that God had given to me. I mean, I'm struck.
Had it been different in the past for you?
I wrote a book because people kept asking me for a book, and a pastor came up to me and said, God told me to tell you to write a book. But yeah, before...
Never trust those people.
before the devastation, yes, it would have been different.
Yeah, that's what I was really curious about.
Before
Yes.
the devastation.
Before the devastation.
After the devastation, it's like, I could be silent for the rest of my life, Lord, or you, if you want to, you go ahead and use the story. I mean, I'm puzzled by the fact that I'm not supposed to be here. The doctors tell me that all the time. How come you're still living? So I know God has a reason for it, so I just give that to him. I give him that.
And you say you're puzzled. You're
Yeah.
still exploring the reason for it. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah,
Your
like-
puzzle is the puzzle is
and
what is the meaning of
Right.
this extension of my lifetime?
yes, and I'm not in a place where I have to understand it. Like, I need this mystery solved. No, it's more of a, I don't get it, but I trust you. So here it is.
But is there at the same time, because this is what I think might be
Yeah.
the tension or the balance point of this, not the tension, but the balance of it is, but isn't it fun to explore and examine as it does unfold, to be able to just to reflect on it and see, oh, there is a purpose here. It is, there is meaning, there is peace, there is something. And so to be able to see the patterns and to sense the purpose as it unfolds, not because you're striving to make it happen, but because you're interested in seeing God's story in you as it unfolds, as he's writing it and you're stepping through it.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we've covered probably enough for
Yep.
today. And
Thanks, Sean.
we thank everyone for listening. And I think it's been great to explore this biggest wall moment of your life. And I think we're going to do one more episode as like the journey out a little bit, and that we're going to do on this. And hopefully you've enjoyed just Peter sharing his story too, not because he's trying to be the most famous person here, but because sharing your story is something I think we're all called to do. And I'm hoping it encourages others to share their story also as they go through their biggest wall moments. So thanks for listening.
Thank you.
And check out more resources at cancerandpeace.com.
Blessings.